And welcome back to RSReplay. I'm your host, Nikhil Mehta, and with me, joining me once again, is Ben Daciw. Ben, great to have you back on the show.
Nice to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been kind of a rainy Monday here in Baltimore, kind of a fitting follow up to the Ravens' loss yesterday against the Bills. Um, second time they've blown a lead in the second half, a significant lead in the second half in 2 weeks against a good team, right? The Dolphins are real, they're a good team. That wasn't a fluke. The Bills are obviously a good team. And so it's these games against good teams that the Ravens have struggled to win in the past few years. And it's the kind of games they're going to go up against in the playoffs, or kind of teams they're going to go up against in the playoffs, assuming they get there, that stand between them and the Super Bowl. And they have pretty nakedly ambitious plans to get to the Super Bowl this year. That is the talk of the team. Calais Campbell's back only for that reason. There's some pressure because of Lamar's contract. So I guess the big question for me, or I guess to you this week, Ben, is does this Ravens team have it in them to win the Super Bowl? They're 2-2 in Week 4, not a place they haven't been before, but those two losses are pretty tough pills to swallow. So do you think this team can still hit a ceiling of winning a Super Bowl this year?
I think we all knew going into the season that these first 4 weeks were going to be a big challenge out of the gate, getting all these guys off of injured reserve. Marlon was coming off of an injury. Peters was coming off of an injury. Stanley, we still haven't gotten back yet. Gus still isn't back yet. Ajabo probably isn't going to be back until November. But we can finally start getting some of these guys back now that we played through week 4. So I think that getting out of this stretch here at 2-2 after playing some very good football teams and taking two of the best teams in the AFC to the brink, I feel like I think there's a lot of things to be negative about after the first month of the season, and I think there's a lot of things to be positive about.
Yeah,
So in short, yes, I do think that this team can still compete for a Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's so tough because the injuries, which is something we always talk about. You don't know how guys are going to come back. Harbaugh announced that Gus Edwards is going to return to practice this week. Is that a he needs to ramp up and get back into things and will play this year, or is it a he's got to return to practice and just see from there if he can still play, right? Because the Ravens dealt with that with Jawan James last year, with Derek Wolfe last year, two guys that came back, and ultimately, their bodies couldn't hold up. Wolf retired. James tore his Achilles again, and you can't count on players returning from injury to make an impact. So, looking at the Ravens without Ronnie Stanley, Tyus Bowser, David Ojabo, Gus Edwards, even a guy like Charlie Kolar, who you just don't get a chance to even see what he can bring to the table. Without those guys, I don't know that this team can make a Super Bowl. Um, if Bowser seems the likeliest to come back and be able to be an impact player, is that alone enough to take them over the top? I don't think so. Not if there's no Stanley. Not if Makari is another question mark, right? He's dealing with that sprain, and so the ceiling is still Super Bowl, but I think the floor at this point is pretty lowered to them missing the playoffs. I like going in the season. I'm like, oh yeah, they should absolutely make the playoffs. I'm not overreacting, in terms of their bad team or anything like that. But the fact of the matter is, you lose winnable games. That's the difference between you make the playoffs and not, because there are going to be, a couple games against teams that are probably not contenders later this year that are going to be tough battles anyway. Division matchups with the Steelers, the Browns. And you got the Bengals twice still. You've got the Bucks still, and it's a slog. So I think their floor is lowered. I don't think their ceiling is different because their ceiling still relies on these players returning from injuries. But the floor now is starting to be, Bateman, if he has a significant injury, misses some time, these every game becomes a struggle to just get points up when, so many guys are out and you can't really count on them coming back. So I think the floor is lowered, but I think you're right. They still have it in them, to get there. They have the talent. Any team with Lamar does. But yeah, I think it's going to be a question of, yeah, I'm seeing this comment. You just can't continue to give up winnable games. And that's absolutely true, JT, especially against teams like the Bills and the Dolphins. Ben, I don't know about you, but one of the things that's frustrating about losing these games is sometimes they lose to a bad team and that kind of thing isn't going to happen again. They lose to a good team and you're like, damn, I can see this kind of thing happening again. It did just happen twice in 3 weeks. So
I think there are certain things where a breaking point is reached. And I think a lot of people are mad at John Harbaugh right now, and I understand why a lot of people are mad at John Harbaugh, but he hasn't managed to stick around this long by being stupid. He knows there's a problem, and they're going to address a lot of things in practice this week. And I do think they'll come out better against Cincinnati on Sunday night. But I think when I look at this team, the Ravens are in there somewhere. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
The offense was looking absolutely unstoppable, running the ball. Lamar was looking good, throwing in the rain. I was actually quite impressed with Lamar in the first half. And the defense looked great in the first half. They were pushing Buffalo around. They were helped with a couple of drops here and there, but it was very good. There weren't any breakdowns in coverage. The D line was getting a lot of push. Queen had a rough day. We'll talk about that later, but they're in there. There is a good team in there somewhere. Just the mistakes are stopping it from coming all together.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good way of putting it. There's a really good team in there, but they're not able to put it all together, and it comes apart like the offense and the defense stop working at the same time. And that's how you have this cascade of just giving up points on a drive, then giving the ball back to the other team, and then giving up points on a drive. And it happened in Miami, happened against Buffalo. What do you do about it? I think we could probably get into that a little bit later, like you said, but I do think one thing is clear that the team in its current form is just not a contender, is not a true Super Bowl team, but there's a version of this team that exists. We'll get a little positivity out of the way here real quick. Raven of the game. For me, this is pretty simple. I think Justin Matabuke is the only guy who's impacting, the game consistently on a week-to-week basis, disrupting, making plays. He's not quite the interior pass rush presence that we're hoping for, but I think there's also that's way harder than the bar there is pretty high to really be an interior disruptor, and so he still had a couple pressures. I think he had a sack. Solid game from him. J.K. Dobbins had a good game too, but I'm still looking for him to break some of these runs off into bigger chunk gains rather than just kind of finding the space on the 4 to 5 yard carries.
I'm going with Jason Pierre-Paul.
Good one.
He came off his couch. He comes in his first game off a week of practice, and he looked good. He played almost every snap, if not every snap. He looked good coming off the edge. He was probably the better of the two edge rushers that played most of the game. I'm sure we'll get to that a little bit later too, but it's hard to come off your couch after not playing for so long, coming off of a surgery and making an impact in your first game back. This might end up being a really good signing.
Yeah, it's big on Pierre-Paul to play as much as he did. I think that I do think that him playing as much as he did is an issue with the way the Ravens are deploying their edge rushers. And, this is something I was going to mention later, but I'll throw it out there now. The idea of keeping guys like Owe and Pierre-Paul fresh for the end of the game, it's not just I almost think about it like in Madden, the way the substitutions work. The way you can preset substitutions is by fatigue level. So when a player hits a certain point, they take him out. It almost feels like the Ravens do that, where they play Owe and Pierre-Paul, their starters. They did this with Houston, I feel like. They play them until they need the rest. But then the problem is later and later in the game, the periods that they can play get shorter and shorter because they need the rest more frequently. Obviously, over time, they're losing, their stamina. And so instead, I think the Ravens need to be more proactive with those substitutions earlier in the game in the first half so that these guys who the game is coming down to guys like Pierre-Paul and Owe in the second half, and they need to be fresher, I think, at the end of the game. I think Copeland should be getting more. Again, I don't know, maybe he got injured or something, but, Copeland needs to be getting more run early in the games. I think that they need to have 4 edge rushers active for every game. And, I even think, and we'll get into Queen later, but I even think Harrison and Queen should be being used in that role more, even though they're not as good at it, that as Owe and Pierre-Paul. Pierre-Paul and Owe need the rest for the ends of the games because the way Allen and some of these quarterbacks make plays at the end of the games is simply by the defense being so tired. So I'll get off my soapbox for now. We can move on to the Mile High Miracle play of the week. The only plays I had as highlights for the Ravens really were in the first half here.
I think it's pretty obvious what play is going to win this award this week.
Yeah, so I'm gonna mention 2 for the always forced fumble and Marlins pick, both in the first half. This defense continues to generate turnovers at a rate they just couldn't last year. Super encouraging to see. If I remember correctly, they turned that first interception into a touchdown, and they turned the fumble into a field goal. You'd love to see them turn that that second fumble into more than a field goal, but they did get points off of it. And I think that, making sure they got points of it, they got the ball to 36. And to me, that sounds like a great time for a holding penalty to push them back to the 46, and then they end up having to punt. They got points out of both turnovers, and I think that's key. Go ahead with the real play of the week.
Lamar Jackson escapes pressure, throws it up. Mark Andrews tips it up. Catch by Devin Duvernay. I mean, that was beautiful.
No, see,
How many
I'm
times has that gone
disagreeing
against
on
us in
you.
the last few years? That was beautiful.
I knew this was going to be the play of the week, and I actually think it is like the problem with the Ravens offense for two reasons. I haven't got all 22. I can't access the all 22 yet. NFL Plus Premium takes forever to release their all 22. But from what I could see on that play, one, Duvernay and Andrews ending up in the same spot is, to me, just not good route design. It's a consistent thing we see with Roman when the ends of these plays, the second level reads that Jackson is trying to make, players end up in the same spot, and there's just like 3 or 4 defenders in a region where there are 2 players. The other thing is he just tossed that ball up, and that's how his second interception happened. He has a tendency to do this, especially when Andrews is in the area. I like that he's trying to trust his receivers and stuff like that, but I also think that that's how interceptions happen. And to me, seeing it late and knowing that you're seeing something late, that just because you're seeing someone come open, but there isn't enough time for you to make the throw and get the ball there before the defender's there. That's another step of development, and Lamar needs to make, to me, in his mental passing game. So knew you're going to bring that up, but it was frustrating to me looking after the game because I just think that that's not sustainable offense, and that
No, it's not.
like it looks good, but it doesn't even look good. Like it was like, oh my God, how did he do that? Well, he did great to escape the pressure and roll out, but you're getting lucky with that. He got lucky with it with Andrews against the Browns a couple times last year, and it hurt. It hurt him at the end of the game.
When the Ravens are a running football team, like we are still a running football team in Baltimore, and it just feels like we should be a lot better in the rain than they actually are. The rain should have made this a much easier win for the Ravens because we're supposed to be able to run the football so much better, especially when compared to a team like Buffalo. And it, for whatever reason, whenever the rain has played a factor, if anything, it's made it harder on this offense.
Yeah, and Bateman having drops, it's weird. You could argue Buffalo might be more used to it. They're more used to playing in the snow. Maybe, and it didn't feel
I
like
think
the
the rain
Bills
and the
were.
snow are two totally
Yeah,
different things. It's
but
just
I also think the Bills weren't that sharp on offense either. Obviously, they only scored 23 points for their offense. That's pretty pedestrian. And so, to me, stuff like refereeing, the weather, it goes both ways. I don't think, I'm sure there's a call or two the Ravens got that wasn't the right call, wasn't the best call. Really, I mean, obviously to us after a loss, it's going to feel like the refs weren't very good. But, to your point, that kind of stuff tends to equalize teams. It tends to make it a more competitive game, but I don't think that it necessarily made it harder for the Ravens to win than it made it harder for the Bills to win, if that makes sense.
no, I
Um,
understand. I understand that, but I'm saying it shouldn't make it harder for the Ravens to win because the Ravens are just so good at running the ball, or at least they used to be. Greg Roman has made his career off of being a running game guru, and he still hasn't figured out how to make it work this year.
yeah, I think that also goes back to predictability in his play call a little bit. I think that you know sometimes he matches his aggressiveness on first down to get a second and short, and then he's like, "Oh, it's second and short. Let's run the ball." And it's just like, but how did you get to second and short? You passed the ball, and you know I've talked about this. He doesn't run out of light. He doesn't run out of light sets. He doesn't spread it out and run as much as he used to. He creates a lot more traffic, I think, and I think that traffic is opponents are figuring out how to kind of catch the Ravens running backs in that traffic.
I
Um,
think he does. I think he runs out of heavy sets so much because teams are still stacking the box with so many guys. If you go back and like watch that game, Buffalo was having 7 guys in the box that entire game. You need to have a couple of tight ends there, otherwise the running backs are still going to have nowhere to go.
Yeah, but you have to get. I mean, to me, you have to get them to stop like stacking the box in the first. If your plan is to put out heavy personnel against a stack box and just run head first into it every time, or consistently, like you're not going to succeed.
I think against
They
New
have to
England,
be.
that's what happens. Like Lamar made the Patriots pay for cheating in the box so much with his arm. That's what happened against New England. But when it's raining like that, and this might be one of the reasons why the offense sputtered in the second half, when it's raining that much and the defense is stacking the box like the Bills were, it's just so much harder to get the ball through the air. And they're already doubling Andrews, and Bateman was out for most of the second half. And even when he was in there, he was dropping passes. So that's a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
stuff against the Ravens in the second half.
Yeah, but then all you're doing is saying, okay, well, our only choice is to run the ball. And when the defense knows that's coming, I mean, you can
Yeah.
see it on that second and goal, the Dobbins. Everyone on the Buffalo D line knew a run was coming. They knew it was coming to the right with Dobbins. Well, because I think sometimes Roman's rushing his motion on rush plays actually gives away what's happening in the play. It doesn't reveal anything for the offense. And all it took was one missed block, one juke from a defensive player to make Morgan Moses miss his block, and that blew the play up. To me, run blocking plays are so vulnerable to getting blown up because there's really one or 2 points of attack you're trying to get through. It's more complicated. I think it requires more in depth breakdown of the film to really get into.
So
But we are kind of talking.
if I can piggyback off that for a second, I feel like if we're noticing it, I feel like the coaches are noticing it too. Like maybe it's something they'll address, maybe it's something that'll get better. Executing blocks in the running game as the offensive line gets more and more snaps together.
I'm less certain it's an issue of that versus just being too obvious in the red zone. You look at the play clock on those plays, and it's going down to 4-3 seconds every time because even when they decide to go for it on fourth down, they take so long to get it together and run the play, and it gives the
I didn't
defense
get
a
that
better
sense
chance.
against Buffalo. I feel like they've all been doing a
Go
better
watch
job
the
at getting out of the
watch
huddle
the goal
quicker.
to go. Go watch the goal to go plays again. Pretty much every play they're running it down to the wire on the clock. And I know part of that is trying to chew clock off so that Allen doesn't have time. But the problem when you do that every play is it gives the defense the ability to time the snap and they get a better jump on your tackles. And I know we're saying this stuff is like, oh, we see it, but this happens every week. And at a certain point, and I'll bring up the back to practice award now, like this is where we're losing games. To me, we're losing games in one very, very clear phase of the game. It's in these short yardage situations late in games where Roman has either pulled the tricks out of his bag too early or he's getting too predictable or both, right? You've got plays like that little Andrews tight end sneak, Ricard fullback dive earlier in, the proceeding. And then he goes back to just a simple handoff to the running back in these situations. It's like you have more in your playbook that works. Like if they hand the ball to Ricard and like just a fullback dive up the gut, people are going to criticize that too.
Can I
But
just say how much I love that Patrick Ricard was leading the Ravens in receptions for a lot of that game? I think that's hilarious.
yeah, I mean, this is the other thing, and I think Harbaugh talked about this today, right? The adding chippers and more protection for Lamar Jackson means you have less routes underneath. Lamar himself is supposed to be the check down option on some plays, which again I think that's an issue. But you get in these short yard situations and you can't move the ball for a team that's supposed to be really good at moving the ball in short yard situations. So that to me is not a practice thing though. It's a coaching thing. It's a play call thing. What is the process for deciding to go for it on fourth down, making the decision, making the play call? Where's Harbaugh's influence? Where's Harbaugh going over this play call with Roman after the game and saying, okay, we can't do it this way again? And then the next week we had the same issues in goal to go situations. So I don't know. Back to practice for me with players in mind. Bateman's got to not drop the ball. He's wide receiver one, and he needs to catch the ball. That's pretty easy to me. On the same end, Lamar's QB1. I talked about this. He needs to not throw the ball up. But I have a feeling you want to talk about Patrick Queen.
Before I do, I just want to say, I have made a bit of a name for myself defending Greg Roman. I thought he called a very good first half, not so much in the second half, but I do think that there is a genuine effort to adapt to what is going on in Baltimore right now. and I don't think they're going to keep banging their heads against a brick wall. I feel like if they think something isn't working, they will try to fix it. And I think if it doesn't happen against Cincinnati, I could be wrong. But yeah, let's talk about Patrick Queen. My back to practice award goes to basically every linebacker not named Jason Pierre-Paul. Because the tackling was dreadful. Pursuit of the ball carrier was awful. Odafe Owe looked like he was running in mud for the entire second half. Like, Josh Allen should not outrun him by that much. And he missed it. Owe could have had 3 sacks in that game. And Allen just ran right around him that time. Allen is mobile. He's not that mobile to evade what we were told was a freakish athlete with all this speed. Allen should not be able to make him look slow like that. And he looked slow the entire second half. And as for the play at the end of the game where he tackled Singletary to get him on the 3-yard line, he's not a rookie anymore. Why is he the only one who didn't know what they were doing? Everyone else was ready to let him score.
Yeah, I don't know. I went back and watched that after Harbaugh's comments today saying that, it looked like the running back was starting to go down and Owe did what he was coached to do. I'm sure part of that is, coach speak, not wanting to call out players publicly because the Ravens hate doing that. But, one thing I wonder is why, you making an or play call, having it be, let him score or make the strip. Players not on the same page. If you have, which is, and what happened, you have 10 players letting him score and 1 going for the strip. If only 1's going for the strip, that lowers the chance the strip happens. It also means that the other players are trying to usher them into the end zone. They're less ready for the ball to hit the ground and scoop it up to recover the strip, which is the whole point of trying it. And so I also find fault with that being an or play call, giving the option. I think in that case, Mike McDonald, and again, this goes back to Harbaugh having to, I think, take control a little bit more of the decision-making process in these situations. If he's going to be the head coach, he's got to own and really take the reins here, not or try and strip it. It's let them score and carry them into the freaking end zone, because saying or is going to make, your 20, 22, 23-year-old freak athlete edge rusher trying to make a hero play, because that's what he was drafted to do. It's what he did earlier in the game. It's what he's done in past games. Like, of course he's going to try and make the strip. I don't blame him for that too much if he feels like he has a clear shot. But it's the coach's job to put players in this position to succeed. And I don't think they did that with OM that play.
I don't know. I think when 10 guys are doing one thing and one guy is doing another thing, I feel like it's the one guy's fault. Harbaugh is never
going to. I'm not saying Owe, is perfect either. He obviously, shouldn't be trying to play hero ball like that. But I also just feel like this is an easy, this is something, like you said, this is something that's easy to fix. Just don't let them make that decision on the field reacting in time. Just be like, okay, let him score. Because I went back and watched it again. It really didn't look like he was trying to go down like Harbaugh indicated. And, it's tough to blame Owe for trying to make a play in that case when, the pressure is on him quite publicly at this point to make plays for the Ravens. And so he's trying to make a play. He's got to be told to back off. He's in his second year. So as far as Queen, I think one thing to do with him is rush him more off the edge. Use him as a regular pure edge rusher. He's an excellent blitzer. Use him on delay blitzes more. He should be primarily a pass rushing threat for the Ravens right now, partially because that's what they need, and partially because he's just not playing great ball in kind of these short yardage, close quarter scenarios where he's got to make more secure tackles. It's not like he's missing a ton of tackles outright. To me, it's just, you're letting the ball carrier get extra 4 or 5 yards, 3, 4, whatever yards on the play. And that's how they're getting first down. That drop snap that Allen had and was able to run forward for 4 yards. It's like Queen has got, you've got to make that. I know Allen is great and he's huge with the ball in his hands. He's built like a power forward. I get all that. But at a certain point, you've also got to be the man as a defender. You've got to make some of those plays. You're starting inside linebacker. So I don't know where the coaching or what to coach him up specifically on. It kind of again feels like last year. It's a little bit of a mentality thing, um, where he just has these swings of confidence, and then when he stops playing confidently, he loses the attack angles. He loses the intensity when he attacks a ball carrier, and he starts missing those splash plays. Dropping that pick is another thing that he just can't be doing when Allen gives you a pick like that. So I
For
mean, I think you're right that he earns the bracket practice award on his own.
I think for Queen, it's frustrating because he does what does he excel at? Well, like what's the one part of his game that we cannot do without? Other than speed, I've got nothing. And we've got plenty of guys that have speed. And he doesn't read the running game particularly well. He doesn't cover well. He gets dominated by tight ends and wide receivers. He doesn't do anything well. The only thing he does well is speed. So I would like to see him as more of an edge threat. Like, I think it's a good idea in theory, but what's he going to do when he runs straight into a right tackle that outweighs him by 100 pounds? I think he's too small.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think he's necessarily built to be an edge rusher. I just think given, the way the Ravens need more at that position, and JPP are going to need more players to, take reps at that position. That Queen could just rotate there and, be used on stunts and things like that to use his speed. I also, it's the obligatory, mentioning how difficult it is to play middle linebacker in the NFL. How difficult it is to play defense. And I also think like when you see him get washed in the run game, to me, it's the same thing as it was last year. And I'll go back and watch the tape again this week, but he's not playing confidently enough. He's not when he like it doesn't seem like he's too aggressive on his reads. Feels like when he's missing plays, he's getting caught in the wash and he's getting caught behind his own defensive lineman because he's taking too long to react. But we see him react really quickly other times. And so I think there are a lot of times when he's just unsure in that split second after the snap, and that's when he gets behind. And he's got great straight line speed, but when there's no path, it doesn't, like you say, it doesn't matter.
I can
So
only watch a guy fly by a ball carrier basically untouched so many times before I say maybe it's time to give someone else those reps at starting linebacker. Like what at one point do we put Ross in for a few snaps at inside linebacker?
I mean, Ross is on injured reserve at the moment. I mean, I agree that when he's back, he's certainly worth some run. But I also think it's worth.
Is he on injured reserve? I missed
Yeah,
that.
yeah, it was like after week one, he had some foot thing. I don't know if it's season ending. I don't think so. I think it's supposed to be. Um, and
We have so many guys on IR already. I lose track of who's where.
yeah, and I feel like Josh Bynes is playing well, kind of similar to last year. Bynes is kind of playing well, but he's not going to provide that spark typically. Those splash plays that Queen can, but Queens, I don't know. It's tough because I'm not in the room. I'm not in the coaching room on what their plan is for Queen. But at a certain point, this is his third year. His fifth year option decision is going to be coming up this spring or
He's
early
not
early
going to get
summer.
it.
I can't see them picking it up for however much it's supposed to be. But at the same time, they're going to need to figure out something at the position. Queen was supposed to be that guy coming out of college, and he just hasn't been. Maybe he factors in as more like an ILB, a second inside linebacker later in his career. But yeah, not to beat on a dead horse too much. I think Patrick Queen having another roller coaster season to start the year looked really good in some games, and then just fades again, and it's
Here's my thing. I loved CJ Mosley as a player. I thought he, by the end of his tenure in Baltimore, I thought he was a little underrated. That contract with the Jets maybe hasn't quite worked out the way they had hoped. Um, and CJ Mosley, he did a lot of things good, but he didn't do anything great. But I would much rather have CJ Mosley right now than Patrick Queen.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think they're kind of similar
Baltimore
players.
CJ Mosley, I would much rather have than Patrick Queen.
Yeah, I mean, I also think the understand that like there haven't been that many great inside linebackers to come out of college in a while. That really every inside linebacker gets better on their second contract is a pretty clear trend in the NFL. I mean, it's a warning against using those first round picks on them because that first contract they're not going to necessarily be the kind of players you want. They don't typically, I mean, you're hard pressed to find an inside linebacker in the NFL that is a clear cut superstar that's in their first years first 4 years.
I'm not looking for a
It's not
superstar at
getting
the
out there.
inside linebacker position. I'm looking for competency at the inside linebacker
That line
position.
is so thin, though. Like if Queen is competent, he looks really good. Like I think that like it's weird. It's weird because of the way the position is played, but it's a very feast or famine position where he can have a game like he did, rack up a few tackles. He didn't look abjectly horrible in coverage, but he's not an impact player in coverage. And I think that goes back to what you're saying. His impact is really only when he can use his speed in pursuit or in blitzing, and even then, his wrap up isn't solid enough. That's pretty prototypical for a lot of starting inside linebackers in the NFL that are pretty much play very similar to Patrick Queen. So I also think it's just a function of the way the position is, and warning against investment at the position. It's a bigger question. You can really only invest in guys that are you trust the way you trust a Roquan Smith or a Matt Milano. Those are the guys you invest in at that position. Otherwise, it's all about finding value. And the Ravens, for a long time, were really good at that. And it felt like after Mosley, they were moving away from the prioritizing linebacker model. And then it just felt like with Queen, they felt like they had to take a linebacker. And it kills me because after him went T. Higgins and Michael Pittman. And we could talk about what could have been there. But speaking of new additions, the Welcome to the Flock Award for the new Raven. Two guys I'll mention one. Marcus Williams is just still like really good at football, really good at playing safety. He cleaned up the back end of this defense. The Bills couldn't get anything done down the field. He is what Earl Thomas was supposed to be when we signed Earl Thomas. He is playing to me like an all-pro. I just think that he's playing exactly what the Ravens. Playing exactly what the Ravens wanted when they signed him, and I just think that he was an amazing signing. The value's great, and he is the reason that this defense I think held Allen to 23 points because he was just so competent on the back end that Bills were never able to take the top off the defense. We made them earn every yard, and for the first half, I think because our defense was more fresh and that we were bringing guys down faster and better in pursuit, that was working. And then in the second half, we still weren't allowing anything deep, but we just couldn't make the plays up front.
I 100% agree with everything you're saying, but I think I've given Marcus Williams a couple of awards in my short time here on this show. So welcome to the Flock Award. I gotta give another award to Jason Pierre-Paul. I mean, I know it sounds like I'm having a bit of a man crush here, but I was just so impressed with how much of an impact he was making fresh off the couch. It's amazing at that age, coming off of those surgeries. I think it's amazing, frankly, that he can play in the league with. What does he have left? 7 fingers. I think it's just incredible that he's still going.
It's all up here. I think that's the thing. You get to that stage in pass rushing. This is the reason I think maybe Owe is still working on it. He seems to have moves, but not a plan. You have to. It's like boxing. It's like basketball, and receiver coaches talk about breaking the press, like you're doing a crossover in basketball. Same idea as when you're boxing, you're setting up punches to land a specific punch, make a specific move. And it feels like Owe is just trying to use a move to set up his athleticism to make a play. Whereas Jason Pierre-Paul is saying, okay, my moves, my athleticism is part of my moves, but how am I going to use my move to just get completely to the quarterback, not just put myself in a situation where my athleticism has to win? Because that's not having a plan. So I think that's something that Pierre-Paul really clearly has. Another guy that's new that's merits mentioning to me is Daniel Falele. I mean, coming in and playing left tackle, having a really good week in general, I would say. Not perfect, definitely in that last play to Duvernay. Falele couldn't seal the edge on that play, and Jackson had to roll out or fall back, fade back. But overall, really impressive for him to come in, having never played left tackle before. And the Ravens seem to have really hit on him in the draft. I think he's definitely a piece on this O-line for the future. He's one guy I want to mention for breakout of the week. I think you could argue that Justice Hill, who suffered a minor hamstring injury, could be on tap here. You could even argue Devin Duvernay had another good part of his breakout campaign. But for me, it goes back to the Raven of the game, who is just the breakout guy of the season. Justin Madubuike is doing it all on defense. I haven't, again, first half, second half is the thing I want to go look at. Is it kind of the same case where he's making a lot of plays in the first half and then in the second half he's tired? Because to me, again, that's McDonald needing to substitute his guys and change his rotations appropriately. But Madubuike continues to be a force up front. Sorry, Justin Madubuike. I always fuck that
up. Nikhil, I'm mad at you. You spoiled my surprise for breakout of the week. Daniel Falele for the win, baby. I was listening all week about how he was going to need a babysitter for the entire game with Von Miller, and he was by himself for a lot of that game, and he was handling Von Miller quite well. They put Von Miller on Morgan Moses, and he had more success there. So when he was drafted, he was supposed to be a project tackle, and he was only supposed to play on the right side. I was very impressed with how Falele came out. Like, to come out, he handled Miller, he handled the other rushers they sent at him. Again, he wasn't perfect, but none of those sacks were his fault. I think PFF gave him no sacks on the day, so that's a huge boost for the Ravens. If Stanley comes back and they put him at left tackle, they move over Falele to right tackle, and then you have Moses in the swing role, all of a sudden our tackles are looking really good if Ronnie's healthy.
Yeah, and I think that having Falele be a guy who gets those reps to develop is clearly helping him. He's clearly getting better as he plays. He's one of those guys who a red shirt, maybe it was just they did a good job developing, coaching him up, and he's been ready to play. But it does, just watching him, it seems like his play has gotten better. He's doing a good job adjusting to Roman's adjustments to give him more help and things like that. Kind of give him the freedom, or not the freedom, give him the room to operate a little bit more than just straight up one-on-one pass sets. But I think just really encouraging from him. Moving on to head scratcher of the week. I'm going to get a few things out of the way here. Like I said, the refs, there were a lot of plays. It felt like there was some defensive pass interference holding they missed. They called an offensive pass interference on Mark Andrews really early that was bad. There was a scramble that the Ravens challenged that, like, Lamar Jackson, to me, very clearly got the ball past the line to gain while he was still in bounds, and the call was upheld. And, of course, the Brandon Stevens roughing the passer. It was a rough refereeing game. Like I said, I'm sure Bills fans could throw some plays that went for the Ravens that the referees missed. But it's just frustrating when that happens, and there's just nothing to do about it. You're just like, oh, yep, bad, poorly ref game, move on.
You don't make that call at that stage in the game, and that's not even roughing the pass. Even under those very stringent, very kind of subjective rules the NFL has placed, you don't make that call with 2 minutes to go. He didn't hit him in the head. He didn't hit him in the neck. He wasn't excessively late. He didn't land on top of him. He didn't drive him into the turf. Brandon Stevens did that perfectly for a guy who is about 5 inches taller than him and about 50 pounds heavier. How are you supposed to hit a quarterback in the year 2022? Mm-hmm. You don't, clearly. And you know what bothers me the most about that call, Nikhil? Jerome Boger is the one who throws that flag himself. He called that penalty himself. When he calls the penalty, he called it on number 23. Brandon Stevens wears number 21.
Yeah, sometimes where it's just
I the only one who noticed that?
Yeah, no, I saw a tweet about how, when quarterbacks hit the ground, they fall awkwardly. There's a tendency to try and give them flags. I also, I say this every time, asking if I just don't like it when players ask for flags, and, especially flopping. It felt like Mac Jones was asking for flags last week. It felt like Allen was asking for flags, and just feels like Lamar doesn't like, and when he's passing, I'm not even talking about when he's a runner. It feels like when he's in the pocket, he doesn't get the same protection. Partially because he's not a guy who's on the ground calling for, begging for flags usually. And then it's almost like, well, maybe you should start doing that so the refs notice. But, I want to stay away from the refs too much because that just gets frustrating. We talked about the OA thing.
I want to say one thing about Lamar and flags.
Mm-hmm.
Could you imagine how much crap we would have to sit through in sports media if Lamar whined for that flag, pounding his fists on the turf like Allen did? Do you know how much crap we'd have to look at about questioning Lamar's maturity and stuff like that? It would be bad if Lamar did that. autism, or what if he did this? But that was embarrassing from Allen. Like, he was like pouting on the ground like a toddler. That was a joke.
Yeah,
And the fact
and
that he got that flag out of Boger is a joke.
it's just one of those things that I'm like, as a fan, when Lamar gets hit, we want a flag, and anytime Josh Allen gets hit, Bills fans want a flag. That's how it's going to be. Hit mute. That's why I'm back. Um, what I was saying is, it feels like you try this protect quarterback thing just gets to the point where quarterbacks play into it, and
It's just not football. It's not football anymore. You can't play football when a quarterback is sitting back in the pocket anymore without being worried that it's going to be a flag. It's ridiculous. We saw this when Clay Matthews a few years ago, I don't remember who he sacked, but he sacked someone. He landed sort of on top of him, and he did the surrender cobra and just looked devastated. And it's only gotten worse from there, because this is what drives me crazy about pass interference too. When you call it like that, you can't do it consistently.
yeah, because you're counting on players to act, and you're counting on, I think you're also counting on reactions. Um, I don't know. I don't know that there's a good answer for refereeing. I don't know enough details about the process of NFL refereeing, but I also feel like they don't like an annual audit, some accountability. I feel like we don't see ref crews moved around, but it's also frustrating because we end up just complaining about the referees every week, and I don't think that's supposed to be the focus of the game. I think the world. So I don't know what to do about refs, because I feel like, as even just talking about it after the game, you just sound like a big whiner. But
It's frustrating because there's so much hubris among NFL officials. They hated that when pass interference became a reviewable play, and I genuinely think that they didn't overturn any pass interference out of spite, and they were just really mad that that became a rule. And they don't want to sky judge because that's questioning them again. They think they're good. They think they're really good at their jobs. They don't think there's anything wrong.
well, and I think there's reason to acknowledge, like, it's okay to, like, not get all of these calls right. I think that, like, what you're saying, this desire, like, oh, we get every call right. Like, no, you don't. And you're not, like, if you are, something's wrong, because things are happening in these games. Everything is too bang bang. But you know, football, because go back to Bateman's fumble the other week. So many things that's just like, seems pretty clear. They go in, they review, they look at it, and there's not enough to overturn, and there's nothing from there. Um, you know, and it's frustrating because there should be able to be access of, like, we can all watch the replays and see what happened, and understand why a flag shouldn't be called. And anyway, at this point, we're just whining about the refs. So
Let's move
uh
on. Moving along. Oh, head scratcher of the week.
well, and the
So
last thing I want to talk about here was the fourth down, because to me, you know, it's just, you're not executing, right? Lamar's got to scramble, slip forward on that third. We talked about the run. They get down to the goal line, they run it into the pile. Lamar slips on third down, slips forward for two, and he can't find Duvernay. You want to have a problem with that drive, go back to the second goal on the one, not the fourth and goal from the two, when you give the ball back to Josh Allen with a 3-point lead. To me, is worth even less than having a tie game. Having a tie game, you can at least hope maybe they score too quickly or something like that. Or they get lazy and they think that they've got it locked down, because it's a tie game versus they're losing. But I don't know. I'm always a fan of being aggressive in those situations. I'm To me, it's not about not trusting the defense. You're going to have to trust the defense to make a stop either way to win this game at some point. To me, it's more about what's going to give my best team the best chance to win, like Harbaugh says. And you know, we've known for a while that more often than not, that's going for it on fourth down, even in those tough decisions. And the Ravens convert that and they score. We're just having a very different conversation, and you can't evaluate those decisions on the basis of what happened last time or how many times a certain thing has happened. to me, where that comes into play is when you're calling the same plays and things like that, like I mentioned before, the predictability. But the fact that it didn't work X amount of times last year doesn't matter to me because it's a new situation every time.
Let me kind of piggyback off something you just said there. For two things, I want to lead off with one thing. Number one, Duvernay was open. Lamar missed him. So let's get that out of the way. The Raven that totally could have been a touchdown. Number two, John Harbaugh put the ball in Lamar Jackson's hands, just like the Bills did with Josh Allen for most of that second half. If John Harbaugh decides to take the 3 points and Justin Tucker hits that field goal, and the Bills still drive down the length of the field and get a touchdown. You're right. It's a totally different discussion. People are like, oh, why didn't they let Lamar punch it in from the 2? Why didn't he trust his best player? Why didn't he do this? Why didn't he do that? So it doesn't, like, what you do doesn't matter if you don't win. And if you win, again, what you do doesn't matter. It's, did this decision work or did this decision not work? And I just don't like it. And I don't know if we're going to talk about Marcus Peters later, but it's just a very frustrating situation. You'd think that some of these fourth down calls would go our way.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about Peters. I mean, it's not. I don't know. I don't think it's anything like that is anything ever more than, a player getting passionate. They're in the moment and, they have something to say. And Peters is a guy, he's a veteran leader and he feels like he's empowered to express his opinion in that locker room. Obviously I'm sure Harbaugh doesn't love it, of course not, but still, I think that's just part of the team they have. I'm not really sweating that too much.
I think with Peters, the way some people were talking about this, you'd think that he just walked up to Harbaugh and punched him in the face. Like, this feels like such an overblown event. It's just, Marcus Peters has always been an emotional guy. This is a guy who straight up threw a referee's flag into the stands. Like, he's been an emotional guy. He's always acted very, shall we say, loudly. And I get the frustration. I really do. It's been a very frustrating team to watch this last 18 months. I can only imagine what he's been going through recovering from his ACL injury. But people saying that John Harbaugh has lost the locker room and John Harbaugh needs to be held accountable, get over yourselves. My God. No one wants this team to fail more than Ravens fans. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a desire for like kind of snap, I want to see something done, I want to see accountability and all that. All of that's like understandable to a certain extent, but I do think that, if your expectation is that Harbaugh or even Roman is going to get fired after a 2-2 start, you're just setting yourself up to be disappointed. That's
having Lamar learn another new offense, which would be number 3 on his first contract.
I don't even think it would be that. Like,
no. Like
that much of a new offense to learn if they replace Roman. To me, it's just they're an anti-reactionary. They're almost instinctively anti-reactionary in moments when people are asking or expecting them to make a reactionary move. They almost refuse to do it just because they don't want to be reactionary. And that's for better and for worse. They're all about the long game. They're all about long-term stability. And so I just think if you're expecting a huge change, Harbaugh to get fired, he just signed an extension this offseason. It's not happening.
But let's play the what if game. Let's say
but I think you're just playing into those fans. Like, I think the what if game is just playing right into
No. Like, I'm going somewhere with this. I'm going somewhere with this, I promise. So let's say they fire him tomorrow. Who do you get?
Yeah, I mean, but like that's exactly. But I think that they're going to throw 8 names at you. But I also think the point is that that's just not how the team thinks either. Like, they're not thinking, oh, we just got to throw someone else in at head coach, because that's obviously not how things work. It's just not. No team does that.
I saw so much slander pointed at John. I don't like using that word.
Of course you did. People were upset after. I don't know. I don't like people were upset after.
I just saw so much crap. Like, oh, he's the Doc Rivers of the NFL. He's done nothing since winning that Super Bowl, and I'm just like,
who cares? Like, they're just on Twitter. I'm sorry. I don't like. I see all that stuff too, but to me, that's just that's kind of the nature of the beast when it comes to.
Okay, let me just say one more thing in Harbaugh's defense. One more thing, and then we can move on. It's people are looking for a player to throw Harbaugh under the bus and vice versa because they want an excuse to get mad. It's not going to happen. The
No, they
players
don't
love him.
want an excuse to get mad. They just are mad, and that's fine. Like they care, and they're just mad that at the way the game ended, and so they're I don't know. Like I don't see like I'm in my group chats and anything else. I'm the calm down, take it easy guy as much as anyone. But for some people, it's just a matter of I'm frustrated. And I'm frustrated, and that's fine. Like that absolutely happens. So I don't know.
It's
I think
becoming a very annoying
there are people
theme
calling
of
for
begging
Harbaugh
for someone to
firing.
be fired every single week. It's just
Yeah.
getting to be very
So,
frustrating.
but that's every single fan base after a loss. There's 25% of the fans on Twitter are calling for the head coach to be fired. Like
Yeah,
like
you're probably right.
it's
But
just
yeah,
not new. It's not new. Like if you want and anyone who wants Harbaugh to get fired, like Ben's question earlier, like that's where I'm interested in talking about. Who do you replace him with? What are the changes?
and we're
What
not
difference
getting
does he
Sean
make on
Payton.
this team? Yeah, but no, but even then, people are just throwing that out there. I mean, you're getting
No,
sucked
I
into
know.
the Twitter engagement machine here, dude. Like, you want to talk about replacing a head coach? To me, it's not just photoshopping Sean Payton, because replacing a head coach is more than just the vibe in the locker room. You're changing scheme, you're changing strategy, and I think there is a real conversation to be had about Harbaugh and Greg Roman's future on this team and in this NFL. I don't think now is the time to have it and to make that change. But I'm
If
not
the
sure
Ravens
Roman
miss
is.
the playoffs, I will be more than willing to have that conversation with anyone. I will have that conversation if they miss the playoffs.
See, I don't. I think miss the playoffs, make the Super Bowl. I think setting those kinds of goals is like they win a certain number of games, and I actually think you got to go and look at the data of how this offense is performing and where it's missing and what's going wrong in this offense. If Greg Roman is here to make a really good run game, then where's my really good run game? Because
Yeah,
if
that's
that's
true.
supposed to be, if that's supposed to be setting up the pass, then we're not setting up our passing game, and then we have no offense. And so, I think one of the other things in that Greg Roman John Harbaugh conversation is what kind of changes are you willing to make? Because it's clear that the Ravens didn't want to make any huge changes on offense, and so as a result, what's the point in bringing in a new guy? It's not you bring in a new guy. It's not just we want someone different named under our offensive coordinator on our website. No, it's because you want to change your offensive philosophy, and the Ravens aren't ready to do that yet. Moving on, our last award is Unsung Hero for good reason. I was going to mention JPP here, but obviously we've talked about him plenty. To me, the other guy who's stepping up a little bit is Broderick Washington. He's getting more run because Michael Pierce is out, and I think the thing you kind of miss Pierce's ability to blow up plays, but Washington does a really good job holding the line and just being a guy. He eats. His size means he gets double teamed on pass rushing snaps when he's rushing the passer. He's done a good job clogging the middle as a run stuffer. Can't really ask for much more as a fifth round pick from 2020 in his third year. Playing pretty well, and I think he's kind of the player the Ravens have envisioned him to be, a rotational D lineman who can line up in a variety of spots. I think he can line up as either D end or as a tackle, and so I think that's valuable for the Ravens when they're dealing with all these injuries. So shout out to him for stepping up when he needs it.
I got to give it to Patrick Ricard. A lot of people just screamed in anger. It's just, I understand a lot of people don't like Dr. Pancake, as he's been come to known. That's a great nickname, by the way. But he's just so valuable for what this offense is. He can run block, he can pass block. For a while in that game, he was leading the team in receptions. That's not a viable option long term, obviously, but with the rain as bad as it was, Lamar needs a guy he can just check the ball down to, and that's what Ricard was doing for a while. And if he has a bit of space and he can pick up a bit of steam, that's like a guaranteed first down. He's just so hard to bring down. And he helped Falele, he helped Lamar in the backfield. He's trying to get the running game going. It's not quite working out for him, but he does everything the Ravens ask him to do, and he's a very valuable piece to the offense.
Yeah, and I think that people being like, oh, he's taking snaps away from Bateman is, I think Bateman's being on and off the field. Last game was obviously him dealing with an injury. And at a certain point, would I rather have Demarcus Robinson or Patrick Ricard on the field? Well, to be honest, what Ricard brings to the table skill wise is just better than what Robinson does. Until Robinson's proving he's gonna be able to be a receiver in a one-on-one scenario, Ricard's versatility and especially what he's brought the last few weeks to support Falele in the pass game has been huge. So I like that shout out too. We're always a big fan of Pat Ricard on this podcast.
And without Nick Boyle, it's just we need him to fill that pass blocking tight end role. Like he's listed as a fullback, but he functions as a fullback and a tight end. And as long as he's doing that, I mean, people said the Ravens overpaid Ricard, but if he's filling in this dual role, I feel like we're getting a pretty good bang for our buck there.
Yeah, and he plays well. I think the other thing is, in a weird way, he has trouble slipping out of those blocks when he's supposed to be the check down option. And I think the Ravens they need that a little bit more just to get that 1 or 2 yards, in a short yardage situation when you've got guys streaking downfield. You need more underneath. And I think Ricard, that's just the one area where I just want Ricard to be, a little better. Is just make yourself a bigger target in those underneath when you need to slip out for a check down. But looking ahead to next week, it's a tough matchup with the Bengals. I think this has got to be Stanley's debut. If Stanley doesn't come back this week, I'm not sure what the path ahead is, because at a certain point, let's see if he practices in full all week, then you should be good to go. But he had 2 fulls and then did not participate last week, and you're just like, what? So to me, I think a lot of the eyes
I love Ronnie, and I understand that he's gone through a very difficult time with this injury. I'm running out of patience with him. It's Terrell Suggs watched Ray Lewis tear his triceps in 2012 against the Cowboys, and off a torn Achilles, he was back the next week. And Ronnie Stanley has watched the Ravens go down to their 4th string left tackle, and he practiced the entire week and then said, nah, I'm not playing this week. So it's time. I don't like bringing up the money, but the Ravens invested a lot of money into you, and a lot of it you haven't really done anything to earn this contract yet, because you've played 1 game under this contract before getting hurt. He needs to start playing some football, and it needs to happen very soon. That's all I'm going to say about Ronnie.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
I understand it's hard.
I'm not 315 pounds with like a leg that's been surgically reconstructed twice, and
I know. I know. I see the point. I acknowledge the point, but it's time for him to start playing some football. If not,
no, I agree that this is kind of this week is kind of. He's got if he doesn't play this week, then the Ravens need to figure out what their exit strategy with him is.
Don't practice if you're not going to play.
I mean, I don't even think it's that. Like, if he, that I think no, because would you not want him to practice last week then?
No, like I'm just saying, this is if he doesn't play against Cincinnati, why are you practicing every day if you're not ready to play?
Well, because he's trying to get. I mean, I don't think that's because he's trying to get ready to play. I mean, like last week, he didn't practice every day. He didn't practice on Friday last week. And that was when I was like, okay, he's not. He's they're not planning for him to play this week because he didn't practice Friday. And I don't think him practicing twice and then not practicing at all is a good ramp up for him playing. So I don't know. I just don't think that. I don't think it's simple. I think we found out this past week that he had to have a second surgery on his leg. Unrelated to his original injury. I don't know. It's what I was saying earlier is I just don't think you can have that many expectations out of some of these guys. I mean, Nick Boyle is another one that just, has just not really been there. He just hasn't been an impact player the way he was before his injury. And
I don't know what's going on there. He's been active. I haven't seen him at all. Like he was active against New England and he didn't play.
I still don't know if it's him. He's getting his legs all the way under him, or if they're just not sure he's able to have as much of an impact. Maybe they think it's too obvious if he's on the field and it's too obvious that it's a run play. But I also think that they've been having the reverse problem with Isaiah Likely. So to me, you mix up some of their usage and, at that point, it's a little easier to understand, or it's a little easier to disguise what play you're calling. But yeah, I think Ronnie's going to be the main thing to watch for next week. But I think like after a loss like this to the Bills, you're sitting at 2-2. You're playing the Bengals on Sunday night. This team needs to be out for souls, not just blood, but they need to be out for souls. This is kind of I don't think the Bills game is the kind of defining game of the season, partly because it was just such kind of a lackluster game by the Bills too. I think that this game against the Bengals is kind of the, you know, this is going to tell us where the Ravens are going to be able to go this season because, like I said, counting on injured players to come back and make huge impacts is just not, not an option. So in week 6, we're going to have an idea of what team we're dealing with. Is Ronnie Stanley playing? If there's no Ronnie Stanley, we know we don't have Ronnie Stanley. We we're dealing ideally Houston's back and we're dealing with Houston, JPP, and Owe off the edge. That's going to help the rotations, but that's going to give us the opportunity to say, okay, this is the roster that we have to compete this year. Whatever we get from Bowser and Edwards and Ajabo, which to me is just, it's just cake. It's just icing. It's extra. What the team is what we have now. And Sunday night's going to be the test of, can we prepare and execute against a really good team with what we have right now? Because what this past Sunday showed is that we're capable of it, but we can't finish out the game.
I think if the Ravens don't come out like a bunch of angry dogs on Sunday night against Cincinnati, after everything Cincinnati did to them last year at home, that is when I will start being concerned about maybe a little bit of a culture problem. Because if you're not ready to go against these guys after how the last 3 weeks have gone and how your 2 games against the Bengals went last year and all the talking that the Bengals do off the field, that's when I'm going to be concerned.
Yeah, and I think that I mean, I don't know. I try and stay away from the whole, talking and, social media and this and that. But I do think that there should be an impetus for the Ravens to the Ravens to decisively win this game and to come out and keep the foot on the gas and in the second half don't lose focus and execute and all those things. But if it doesn't come together in this game, I really have a hard time believing it's going to come together for the rest of the season. And it's rare that I would put a referendum on one game quite like that. I'm obviously usually a pretty balanced guy, but pressure's on Roman to deliver. Pressure's on McDonald to, this is another huge test of his defensive ability against an offense that's getting hot. And it's on Harbaugh to coach to a win against a team that is becoming a monkey. And the Ravens seem to have these stretches where a team is just a monkey on their back. And it was the Chiefs for a while. It was the Titans. Now it seems like it's the Bengals. And I don't think that's a good way to move year to year, is to just keep moving to a different monkey. You have to get off your back because to me, you're never making any progress. You want to be the monkey. Yeah. What a weird thing we've landed on.
I don't think the Bengals have beaten the Ravens enough times in a row to be considered the monkey on the Ravens' back. I think general playoff success is the monkey on the Ravens' back.
No, I think this is the game that's, will the Bengals be the monkey on the Ravens' back? Has there been a paradigm shift has there been a fundamental paradigm shift in the AFC North now, where this is the Bengals division, because these are the games that the Super Bowl teams win. These are the ones you walk away with. And I know it's week 5 and it's so early, but you got to see it, and the team's got to build off something. Following up a game against the Bills like this with a loss is that's a tough look. And I don't like saying stuff like this because I recognize these guys are like grown men playing football, but like it's a roll over and play dead kind of moment if we can't come in and beat the Bengals at home next weekend. Like that is just that after a loss like this, you think about the way a season's supposed to go, and it's okay. We cannot drop to 2-3. We cannot drop a game to the Bengals. We have to win this game, not for the record, not for the end of the season, not for the division, but for us, for our team, for our mentality, to remind us what we're capable of. We have to win this game. And I think that's a good place to end it. I think that is really where this team needs to be. They have to prove to themselves what they're capable of doing, and this game against Cincy is going to be the way for them to do it. All right, Ben. Well, thanks so much for joining me as always, and we're looking forward to having you back on the pod later this year.
Thanks for having me.